Hello, welcome to the webinar, Ghostwriting B2B Thought Leadership. This is a free webinar put on by the B2B Writing Institute, where we help people learn how to write excellent marketing content and get paid for it. My name is Sarah Griesenbach. I'm the founder of the B2B Writing Institute. And just in case you're wondering, no, we could not have fit any more marketing jargon into one title, but we'll soon discover that every word is important and every word has meaning. We're going to talk about the ghostwriting part, which sometimes defines many different kinds of working relationships. And we're going to talk about the thought leadership part. Now that's a word that's been a couple of years into its retirement as jargon, but we haven't figured out something better to use for it. So we still use that one. So we're talking about this today because on the surface, it might seem like ghostwriting is just one kind of writing, but I'm actually going to make the case that all B2B writing is ghostwriting. It's just that sometimes you're writing on behalf of a person and publishing under their name. Sometimes you're writing on behalf of a company, publishing it anonymously. Sometimes you're writing on behalf of yourself as a service provider. And sometimes you're writing on behalf of yourself or a company providing an offering or a product to the people you're selling to. And all of that kind of changes the nuances of how you do what you do. And that's where all the magic happens. And that's what we're talking about today with Laura, Lee, Liz, and Cole. So a few technical notes. We're in the chat, so you'll hear a few comments about that as we go. No one should be shy. We're all surrounded by curious writers. And this is a very safe place to ask questions or email with questions if you're watching this in the replay. You can also feel free to pop in and out for the speakers and catch the replay later because we're here for your schedule. Whatever's going on in your life right now, I know for a fact it is not always easy to find 2 hours to sit quietly in a neutral spot, especially if you're parenting or caretaking right now. And for our next speaker, we have Nicolas has joined us. Nicolas Cole, thank you so much for coming. And I'll be able to share some links about what you're doing. But we'd love to hear, some of those great ghostwriting templates and just different ways to get subject matter experts' ideas out onto the page, which is a specialty for you.
There we go. I had the wrong camera setting. No, thanks for having me. I'm happy to share. Yeah, what would be most helpful? I've got that thread pulled up. Should we just walk through the different templates?
Because even the concept that you can take just anyone's idea and filter it through these 4 types of articles or types of looking at thought leadership, I think that's the process that people really need to start to learn and deploy in their business.
Awesome. Then if you don't mind, why don't I just share my screen and we can walk through tweet by tweet so that people
I love it.
People get it. But yeah, just for context, so everyone knows where this is coming from. My name's Nicolas Cole. Everyone calls me Cole. I've been ghostwriting for about 5 years now. I built a ghostwriting agency called Digital Press. I've written for probably north of 300 different executives and founders, some Grammy winners and Olympians thrown in there as well. But mostly my sweet spot is in business and even more specific, Silicon Valley, a lot of high growth tech startup founders and venture capitalists and investors, things like that. And because I ended up building a company at our height, we had probably 100 clients, 20 full-time employees, a handful of writers, a handful of editors. It required us to create templates. We had to find ways to scale because we were writing for so many people all at the same time. And all of this was based on my own writing journey on the internet, writing on Quora, writing on Medium, writing on Twitter. So what I did is I created a handful of these templates that basically we used across the entire company. And they're still templates that I use today. And it really showed me that even though each person you're ghostwriting for is its own experience, they are their own person. The reality is that most of the time you end up coming back to the same handful of containers. There's only so many ways to tell a story. There's only so many ways to structure an opinion article or a chapter of a book or something like that. So in this thread, and I'll walk through each example for you, I was explaining that for all these people that I've written for, I basically use the same 5 templates over and over again. And I think having this as a starting point is really helpful because it allows you to, it's easier to fill a house with furniture rather than rebuild a new house every single time. So if every time you're ghostwriting for someone, if you're starting with a completely blank page, that makes the process feel very overwhelming. It's very difficult to start there. And so for me, I was ghostwriting for sometimes 3, 4, 5 different people in a day, every day for 5, 6, 7 days a week. So in a given week, I've got 20 or 30 voices going on in my head. So that's a very difficult thing to juggle. So using templates like this can really help you create the scaffolding. And then all you're really doing is putting each person's individual story, individual insights inside the scaffolding, which allows you to scale. Because everyone here, if you're a freelance writer or a ghostwriter or a copywriter, or you're using writing as your way of making a living, then you know your biggest constraint is time and it is mind share, right? Every time you write for someone, your mental energy goes down, it dwindles. And so you can only do so much in a day before your brain just goes, I can't do this anymore. So little things like this for me have really helped scale my business and also my ability to write for many people at the same time. The first one that I wrote about is, I call it the mistakes and the lessons. This is, to me, the easiest template you can use. You can structure entire books this way. This is great for articles. It's great for if you're ghostwriting for people's social media, their Twitter, things like that. But really, all it is, you're just asking the person, what was a mistake that you made? And what did you learn from it? And you could take one mistake and make that the focus of the piece, or you could take a broad mistake and go, okay, now what were all the little mistakes that made up that bigger mistake? So for example, if I'm ghostwriting for a founder who said, I tried building my first company, it failed, and then I built my second company and it succeeded, I have dozens of pieces that I can extract from that, because all I have to say is, what was a mistake that caused your first company to fail? And the founder might go, oh, I made a huge mistake with hiring. Okay, great. Let's do a whole piece just on hiring mistakes. What was the mistake you made? What did you learn? And so that could both be one piece in itself, or it could be multiple points within a piece. So they might go, okay, I'm going to do a piece of, these were the 5 biggest hiring mistakes that I made trying to scale my first service company. And then the structure of the piece is very simple. You can see the scaffolding. This is the mistake. Here's the moment it happened. And here's what I learned as a result. Point number 2, here's the mistake. Here's the moment it happened. Here's what I learned as a result. And you can, this is what's so fascinating about pulling back the curtain and talking about how you assemble these things, because you can take a very simple structure like that and literally copy paste it for 300 pages in a book. And the reader will have no idea what you're doing. They'll just go, wow, this is so brilliantly constructed and it was so easy to read and I enjoyed it so much. But all you're doing is you're basically just going ABC all the way down the page. So for me, I was primarily writing about 800 to 1200 word articles. So they all would fit in that sweet spot of like, here were 3 hiring mistakes I made. Here were 3 scaling mistakes I made. Here were 3 profitability mistakes I made. Here were 3 marketing mistakes I made. You could just keep repeating that over and over again. The second is creating frameworks. So anytime, in a sense, this thread is a framework. Anytime you can get someone to, and I have it in bullets here, name the problem. So this was what I was experiencing. Pinpoint the actionable steps that they took to solve the problem, and then the outcome. What did it lead to? And if you think about this as a story arc, what you're really saying is conflict, journey, resolution. That's really all it is. So for anyone to come up with a framework, how you do this is you ask the person, okay, what were you experiencing? What was the problem? And now, and what everyone's going to do when you ask this is they're going to immediately jump to the conclusion. They're like, I faced this problem and then we fixed it and everything was great. But it's all the stuff in the middle that is the valuable stuff. That's what the reader cares about. The reader, it doesn't help the reader if the person just goes, and then I was successful, because the reader's like, well, how did you get there? So your job is to really help slow the person down and go, okay, wait, so you were having trouble finding the right employee. What were the things that you were doing? You were asking the wrong questions in the interview. You weren't pairing them with someone in the company to give them mentorship. Like, you're really trying to slow down at each step. What had to happen in order for you to unlock this outcome? And at each step, all you're doing is you're listening for it and you're pulling it out. And you're going, that was step one, that was step two, that was step three. And what I've found with ghostwriting is that's really your job. The people will give you the answers. Your job is to figure out what you want to shine the spotlight on. And so that's what you're listening for. You're listening for the steps. You're listening for the milestones. You're listening for the meaningful decisions, the points where the thing changes. And then you pull each one of those out and you go, okay, to solve this problem, step 1, 2, 3, this is the outcome. And that's a framework, right? And you can do that over and over again. But the key is to just slow the person down and to really get them to give you the answers. The third is, which is, to me, it's a fun one, but it's also very easy to execute, which if you're ever working with someone that doesn't have a lot of time, this is a great template to use, because some of the other templates like mistakes and lessons, for example, you need them to give you a description, right? You need them to open up and tell you, like, this was the mistake, these were the things that were going on. And those conversations sometimes take a little longer. If the person is really short on time and they go, I just need someone to help me ghostwrite content, the easiest way to do that is to talk about the future, right? Because you can research the future. You can go look up stats and insights and trends, and you can do a lot of the heavy lifting on your own. All you really need is for them to say, I believe it's going north, or I believe it's going. That's really all you need. And then you can go fill in the rest. So futurism writing is very, where's your industry headed? Or where is this thing headed, this idea? Which direction are you thinking in? And then maybe they'll give you a why. I think this because of this. But your job is then to fill in all of the pieces. You go do some research, you look up stats that back up that argument. That puts more of the heavy lifting on you, as opposed to asking them to give you all this time to give you all the answers. So I find that framework to be really helpful. The fourth is, if you've ever done any work in PR, the intersection of PR and ghostwriting is very interesting, because that's where people basically just want to talk about how great they are. And if you've been writing for a while, then you know no one really cares about that. Readers don't care about it. Publications don't care about it. It's a very self-serving sort of thing. And so I believe your job as the writer or the ghostwriter is to educate the person. I don't think that people hire writers so that they can tell them what to do. I think they hire writers to help the client understand or learn all the things they don't know. So a big part of my job when I'm working with people is explaining, hey, if you frame it that way, no one's going to read, because it's all about you. No one cares. Okay. So you soften the language, right? But no one cares. So instead, you don't want to get the person locked into talking about how great they are. You want them to talk about where their category, where their industry, where their market is going, and then they can use themselves as an example. Okay, so I'll give you a case in point here. One version is, say I'm both the writer and I'm my own ghostwriter. So I go, one piece is, I just want to talk about how amazing I am. I built a company, got all these views on the internet. Look how great I am. You should read about it. And nobody cares. The other way of approaching it is me going, I think that in 10 years, this is where the publishing industry is going to go. I think that based on these trends and these things that are happening, I think this overarching category is really going to change. And here's my perspective on it. And the reason I think this, using myself as the example, is because I've built a company and I've worked with hundreds of people and I've written thousands of pieces. And this is where this perspective is coming from. So when you use the person as the example in a larger context, it works. That's your category point of view. It is more about where you see things going. It is how you see the world. It is your perspective. And then your story or your successes or the client's successes is the validation to the category point of view. But if the person just goes, I just want to write an 800 piece about how amazing I am, then it's your responsibility to tell them nobody's going to want to read that, right? It's something that I say all the time in my writing groups and other writers that I'll mentor as well is, you are not the main character of the story. Your reader is the main character of the story, right? So as much as they matter, it's not about them. It's about the reader, and they can use themselves as the example, but they cannot be the main character. And that's a really hard thing for people to wrap their head around. But these are the things where when you educate people in this way, they don't just view you as a transactional writer, right? They view you as this massive value add to their life because you're helping them not just write, but think. That's really what you're being hired to do. It's not just put words on paper, but to think, to clarify thoughts. And then the fifth is anytime you can pull back the curtain and do myths. Here are the things that everyone thinks about my industry. Here's why those are, here's all the things that people think they need to do to be successful. Here's why those are wrong. So anytime you can do debunking or demystifying an industry or a topic, readers love reading about that. It allows them to feel like you're pulling back the curtain and you're giving them something really exclusive, really rare. Not everyone has access to this. So for example, like one of the most popular articles that I've written for myself was I wrote for Inc. magazine for about 2.5 years. And after I stopped writing for the publication, I wrote a piece called something like five myths that I learned weren't true after writing 400 columns for Inc. magazine. Right? Why do people love it? Because I was saying, hey, I spent 2.5 years over here. I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm going to show you all these things that people don't typically tell you about writing for major publications. So this as a template can be extremely effective as well. So I know we just breezed through all of those. It's like drinking out of a fire hose, but questions or things that we can go more in detail on?
I love it. The fire hose is the best way to get clean when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
I think I'm wondering, when you very first started with frameworks, I think for people who are resistant to frameworks, it's easy to say, this just takes the magic out of it. This commoditizes writing. It means the writing is going to suck. It'll get old after time goes on. But these still work. Like I use these, everyone uses these. It always is interesting when you frame a new idea in these formats. Why do you think this still resonates? Like, why can we put a process to this, even though writing is an art that's creative every time? It's like two worlds.
Totally. And to be clear, in the beginning, I felt the same way. I consider myself a classically trained writer. My college degree is in fiction writing, and I studied literature, and I studied the great Russian writers and the American writers. Like I consider myself a classical writer, and it was hard for me to be open to this way of thinking. But after you write for a really long time and you do it over and over again, you start to realize that whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, your brain is doing this inherently. Your brain is creating templates for you. There's a reason why, like, you go through periods where for 3 months, everything you write has a similar tone or cadence or flow or structure, because your brain is creating a new format for you to play in. So for me, once I realized that, I thought, okay, why don't we just cut to the chase here and create formats that I can use over and over again? Because you're running a business, you're supplying a service. Like, to say it really directly, if you can't perform, like, then the client's not going to be very happy. So if you're starting from a blank page every single time, you're just making it harder for yourself. You're just not, there's no efficiency there for you. So yeah, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
After you.
I think the reason why these work is because it's like, why are like movies, when was the last time you saw a movie that wasn't told linearly? Right? There's a reason why that works. And so it's not so much, I think where people get caught up is, if you use a template, then that means like all the magic and all the creativity is gone. And it's really not. I think it's the opposite. I think that it means that you're creating a container where you can focus even more on the creative side without constantly thinking, how am I going to make sure that at the end of the day, this house gets built and it doesn't all collapse on itself? So I think organized chaos or organized chaotic creativity is a lot better than disorganized creativity where you think, oh, it's all just magic. It's really hard to do that consistently.
And Lindsay added a great point in the comments. These are modular, so you can reconfigure these and make art in later drafts. But having that template right at the start, that's what it lets you sit down and get to work and get to flow really quickly.
Totally.
So questions pouring in. So first with Ben, what's a typical minimum engagement timeline for working with ghostwriting clients? So ROI isn't seen overnight, but what do you advise as far as, I guess that's starting a ghostwriting program with a client?
So this is a bit of a rabbit hole because it depends on what your measure for success is. Like this question of ROI, if you're a sales copy, your measure for success is likely, are my words generating some sort of profit? It's very tied to a sales video or a sales script or a sales page or whatever it is. Most ghostwriting, though, if it's articles, books, or speeches, the measure for success, to be honest, is whether or not the client likes it, because it's their name that's going on. It's representing them. For me, my sweet spot ended up being articles, and I would do 7-day, 5-day turnarounds on articles all the time. We'd have a conversation. I'd jot down a bunch of notes. I'd go through the recording and I'd put together a first draft and send it to them within 4 or 5 days. And in rush cases, I would do that with people within 24 hours or even within 6 hours. Like that was my sweet spot. For books, it could be anywhere from 3 months to 6, 9, 12 months. It depends on how complicated the book is and things like that. And then really the goal, because I guess it depends on what your aspirations are. I got into ghostwriting because I wanted to learn. I wanted to practice my craft. And I wanted to quit my job and make more money. I was working in advertising, and ghostwriting was really lucrative for me. But my aspiration was always to work on my own writing. Ghostwriting in many ways was a means to an end for me. I really enjoyed it. I loved it, but it was a means to an end. And so if that's the case for you, right, that's why I talk so much about efficiency and scale, because if your goal is to make money over here so that you can do something else over there, then you don't want to spend 12 hours a day ghostwriting. You want to find ways to increase that efficiency so that you have more time to work on other things that you want to do as well.
Yeah, it seems like fiction degrees don't stay hidden for long. That's always,
yeah, right. You're always going to come back to it.
So Lee asks, I'm wondering about scale. So how do you manage voice for each client when you're working with so many different people, maybe at once or within the same week?
I love this one. I'm going to let everyone in on a little secret here. Everyone thinks their voice is super different, and it's not. Like, really, ghostwriting, especially if you're in business, but I think this is true for any vertical. It just depends on which one you specialize in. But in ghostwriting, people are basically just paying for it to read. So like 85% of it is pretty much anyone would want to put their name on it. Like it just reads well. Like it's just smart. Like it's just a solid, smart piece. And then the last 15% is the style. And that's where you'll have certain clients that go, no, I would never say happy. I would say jubilant. And it's like, in many ways, like meaningless word changes, but they're not meaningless through the lens of style, because this person wants their voice to sound a little bit different. Or one person wants to soften the language versus one person wants to have more conviction with what they say. All of these are very small, like literally changes between 1 or 2 words. I remember I've worked with so many clients that literally would read something that I sent them and they would send it back with no edits and they would go, I think this is just coming off too harsh. We need a full rewrite. And I would read the first paragraph and I would notice like a couple words where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm leaning into this a little too much. And all I would have to do is go in and soften like 3 words. And then I'd send it back to them and they'd go, this sounds like me. Now sounds like me. So a lot of times you have to discern what is the person really asking for. When someone says this needs a full rewrite, that's usually not the issue. The issue is like 1 or 2 words or phrases or framings of things where they go, that's not really me. So scale is all about picking a niche or a vertical. Like for me, I go high growth technology startups. Great. Like all those founders sound the same. They all sound the same. Or if you're in health and wellness, like 99% of people all sound the same. You learn the vernacular, you learn the tone, like they all sound the same. And when you do that, when you only specialize in one sort of niche, then that allows you to move very quickly and work with lots of different people because you're basically writing in the same voice all day. And then it's just that last little 10% where people go, I would rather want this word, or I want this a little harder, this a little softer. That's what allows you to achieve scale with it.
And Lee shared, she's had Midwesterners ghost her with feedback and the issue ended up just being 1 word.
Literally, I've had that happen so many times.
So another question from JL, which media, print or digital, do you prefer for ghostwriting projects?
I am a digital native. I am on the mid to younger side of millennials. I'm 31. I grew up on the internet. I started ghostwriting when I was 26. So pretty much everything that I've done has been digital and digital first. And my perspective on it is that's only going to keep accelerating. All of the most lucrative ghostwriting opportunities are all digital. Really, the only time that ghostwriting is truly lucrative from a print perspective is you're ghostwriting a very high level byline for a politician or a CEO to go in like the Wall Street Journal or something, which is rare. Like I think pursuing those is usually more effort than it's worth. And or a book. You're ghostwriting a book that is for a celebrity or someone really prominent at a major publisher. It's a 6-figure paycheck for you. And it's a 12 to 24 month project. And those are big lifts, but there's a ton of money to be made ghostwriting digital things. You could ghostwrite people's Twitters. You could ghostwrite white papers. You could ghostwrite landing pages. The list is never ending.
Mm-hmm. And Liz brought up, you can get a lot of their voice from lightly editing their answers to your questions. I've done that a lot myself in white papers. And I wonder, coming back up here, I know, so we've looked from the viewpoint of an expert looking back at voice, 85% of it, it's not that big a deal. Maybe if we're starting at the beginning, Christos asks, how do you change your voice? So what would a tip be if you're doing this for the first time and voice seems like it's this really significant part of it? What's the first step you could take to taking on the voice of an industry or a particular person? So
the way that I trained my brain and practiced in this way is, I'm sure I jumped on a little late, but I'm sure other panelists, were saying how it's important to record the conversations, get them transcribed. One of the most interesting things about reading through the transcription is you can really see the cadence of the voice. And I've found that you tend to experience, there's two different types of ghostwriting clients. There's ghostwriting clients that go, I want my writing voice to be a replica of my speaking voice. And then there's ghostwriting clients that go, I want my writing voice to come off as the opposite of my speaking voice. So I've worked with people who are like really crass and really blunt on the phone, but then in their speaking voice, they want to come off like some refined politician. And it's just like, there's a huge difference. And so the first step is, I think, understanding which one of those are you dealing with. And then second, as just an industry secret here, a big part of it is really just editing down the transcript. If you find in the transcript, if you find a sentence or a pocket where the person's just explaining something and you're like, wow, they just said that, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like literally the way I ghostwrite is it's like assembling Legos for me. Like everything is a piece. And so what I'll do is I'll go through the transcript and I'll pull out individual sentences or I'll pull out individual paragraphs where that's their voice, that's the way they said it. They've already done the hard work. My job is to just figure out where that goes and what goes before it and what goes after it. And so I think the way I like thinking about it, especially in the beginning, is consider that approved language, right? Like they already said it. That's them saying it. So consider that approved. And your job then is to build around it or to stack multiple pieces on top of each other. And then it's easier to build the voice from there rather than go, I get what they're saying. Now I have to go invent something totally new.
And I wonder, so we're getting right at time. I don't want to hold anybody over, but the final question just might be for someone who's written a lot of feature articles, maybe even book chapters, but they want to move into larger pieces of work or books. What's a good way to cross that bridge and kind of show that you can do that kind of project?
I have a very contrarian viewpoint here. Every time I share it, people disagree with me, but it's worked really well for me. Do the first one for free. I am such a consider it a marketing cost. I am such a firm believer that the fastest way to move up the value chain is to do the first one for free. The reason I say this is because it doesn't matter if someone pays you if you can't do the thing, right? Like you have to prove that you can do the thing. And if you can do the thing, then after you do the first one, it'll be really easy for you to monetize the second one. But you need to learn and you need to prove to yourself and to someone else, I can do the thing, right? So you might as well just remove all the friction and go, I'll do the first one for free. Pick a small one. Don't sign yourself up for 2 years of free work. Pick a small one, prove you can do it. And then take it to the next person and go, hey, I just did this book with this person. Now I'll do it with you. And then you start low, and every project you raise your prices. And people act like this is signing their life away. You can literally do this in like less than a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then you're just, boom, you're off and running. But I've found that is the easiest way to very quickly get into making money off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got some screaming no's. We've got some pitchforks in the comments, but I'll let the comment stand.
It always happens.
And especially, I just want to highlight what you said about having boundaries around it. So to me, it's more about, are the weights of the scale even? And if it's someone taking advantage of you and getting free stuff, like that becomes more of a no. But if it's, let's say someone, an industry or a project you believe in, and you can do that quickly and have these firm boundaries around it, I could be talking to that myself.
Yeah. And you never know where it'll lead. Some of the biggest leaps that I've made in my career were offering to do something for free for someone who had more money than they knew what to do with. Like, I've offered my services for free to founders that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course they can afford it. But the reason that I did that was because I wanted to show them, I want to do this with you. I want to show you what I'm capable of. I want you to remove the friction and to give me a chance. And then they do. They weren't going to pay for it. But if I offer it for free, then they're like, all right, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And then they do. And then they fall in love with it. And then they see that they can trust me. And then they open huge doors of opportunity. And I took that on as a risk, and it opened up a lot as in a reward, right? So I'm not saying work for free. That's how I'm saying. I'm saying make strategic decisions. And the fastest way to start getting paid for a certain type of work is to prove that you can do that type of work. And the fastest way to prove you can do that type of work is to do it for free one time, and then you can move on.
I am going to doctor the video to make it look like you're saying you should work for free forever.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know it is not easy to find the time in your day or sometimes the interest for topics for webinars. Lately, they seem like they can be a little boring, but that is something we will always try to avoid here. If you like what you heard, you're going to get an email with links to each of the people who spoke today. And you will also be on the list for the B2B Writing Institute. Every other Wednesday, I send out a note about writing, value, B2B, all these things that keep our skills sharp and really engage with what we're trying to do. If you're looking to learn about B2B writing in a formal setting, we have the B2B Writing Career Kickstarter, which is an on-demand course and live co-writing session where we write your first clips in B2B together. Thanks for joining us.